For thousands of years, we've divided the world into two categories, persons and things. The Greeks called humans zoonlogon ekon, the animal with language. If something spoke, it was intelligent. It was us. Until now. Professor David Gunkel, presidential teaching professor at Northern Illinois University, and one of the world's leading philosophers on artificial intelligence and robot ethics. For over 15 years, he's been exploring what others considered unthinkable. Can machines have rights? Should they? Author of the groundbreaking book Robot Rights and 17 other works, Gunkel has dedicated his career to the question everyone else avoided. While the world debated AI responsibility, he asked about AI rights. Because here's what's changed. Machines now speak, learn, and evolve. Our laws, built on a Roman binary of person versus thing, have no answer for entities that blur the line between both. Today, he joins Dr. Goudarzi, international lawyer, PhD in international law, and founder of Nexter AI Group, who after decades in law realized we need a radical solution. Virtual persons, a third category of personhood for AI. Once a machine can speak, everything changes. This is the conversation that rewrites the rules of existence itself. Welcome.
Hello, good morning, David. Professor David Gunkel. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to talking to you.
It's the first time that we are meeting face to face. We had some email communications, and I'm so excited that we have you here. I'm excited to ask you several questions and go through interesting subjects that you always talk about. So let's start with allowing you to introduce yourselves to our listeners and audience. Professor Gunkel.
Gunkel, I am chairperson and distinguished teaching professor at Northern Illinois University. And for those of you in the rest of the world, you can place that on the map. It's just outside Chicago. So I live in Chicago and I work at Northern Illinois University. I have degrees in philosophy and in communication studies. And I specialize really in the philosophy of technology with a focus on emerging systems in artificial intelligence and robotics. I think what makes my research distinctive, however, is that I focus not so much on the questions of AI responsibility, which I think in AI ethics is the big question, like how do we hold the algorithm accountable, or who do we hold accountable when an algorithm does something that is improper? I have been concerned with the sort of flip side to that question, because whenever we look at responsibility, we also have to talk about rights. And a responsible agent is also capable of being a moral patient, which means that they may have moral and legal status within our existing ethical and legal systems. So a lot of my writing is really focused on questions of the moral status of artifacts and the evolving questions regarding robot rights, AI welfare, all these kinds of things you might see circulating just recently in literature. I've actually been writing about it since around 2008, and number of books on this subject, but also some related things having to do with large language models and the philosophy of language and communication, etc.
Brilliant. It's been a long time you've been writing about these things, and actually the wake-up moment for me was about 3 years ago when I gave up my legal career. I'm a lawyer. I always loved technology. And at some point I felt, okay, I reached the top of my career. And when AI went live, I felt like, wow, this is my playing field. I want to play with this thing. This is something it really excites me. So I started doing a lot of research. We tested a lot of tools. Almost every tool that came to the market, we tested them. And at the time, I remember there were only about 1,000 AI tools on the market. Now we are talking about 100,000 plus AI tools on the market. So as soon as something came up, I was testing them. I was doing some research, and it led me to this question. The wow moment was the time that I was thinking, okay, we have me and you as natural persons in law, and we have legal persons, which are persons. Where is AI? Where does it stand? It's not a natural person. It's not a legal person. It's not a company. I felt like it could be a virtual person, a third category of personhood. And that led into my further research. And that is when I found you and I saw your work, that you've been talking about these things for a long time. So that led me into writing the book, The Emergence of Virtual Person. I wanted to put this out. So the book touches the surface. It's not similar to your literature, which are very academic and very detailed. But I just wanted to let it out. Basically, I wanted to tell the world that I want to talk about virtual personhood. And also people who actually are the opposite of your theories. They argue, maybe we talk about them, that robots are slaves. So when was the time that you decided to talk about these things? It is quite revolutionary and forward thinking to talk about AI and robot rights, and especially several couple of decades ago, you've been thinking about it and writing about these. So what led you into this area of work?
I think what led me into this area of work is that there was a lot of effort in AI ethics being directed at the question of AI responsibility, and for good reasons. When a self-driving car takes out a pedestrian, we do want to hold someone accountable, and our notions of justice are not well served if we can't point the finger to an agent and say, you are culpable for this accident. But AI was already complicating that with this kind of many hands problem, as Nissenbaum talks about it, and that you could pass around responsibility to more than one agent or interacting agent in a system. Conversely, you had the question of, would such a system have any rights under our legal system? And so all of this started moving me in the direction of thinking about this fundamental dichotomy that we work with in both moral philosophy and law, where we only seem to have two categories of being. You are either a thing, therefore a piece of property and an object of the law, or you
Hmm.
are a person, a subject of the law. And
Hmm.
as you said, we have natural persons, we have legal persons. So even the notion of personhood can be a little more finely distributed based on that. But it does seem that we are working with a binary opposition that we inherited from Gaius in the Roman tradition, and that these new systems, we're struggling against those categories, or at least
Hmm.
challenging us to struggle against those categories. So I think your proposal for virtual personhood is, one way of responding to this challenge. Maybe we don't categorize the AI as a thing as we currently understand it, or a legal person as we understand it, but we develop some sort of new third category that is somewhere in between thing and person. I think that's the terrain that we're entering right now. And I think
Hmm.
there's good reasons for it, because we are going to have to figure out how we fit these very powerful, very social, very capable systems into existing legal practice where we don't necessarily have good precedent for doing so.
Absolutely. So yes, it's a very good analogy of classifying things in law between person and thing. And as you mentioned rightly, AI is a thing, but it's completely a different type of thing that we've ever seen so far. It's our own creation, and it's becoming almost smarter than us, and this is the direction we may be taking. So, can you give us more information about the latest development in this area that led us to consider that AI could be something completely different than a thing?
So let's take the most recent big innovation, and that's the release of ChatGPT in November of 2022, and the advent of the large language model and generative AI as we recognize it currently. The thing that I think makes this thing more than a common thing, in other words, the thing that makes the large language model different than your coffee maker, your toaster, or your automobile, is that it uses language. And it uses language fluently, persuasively, and convincingly. For over most of human history, if something uses language, the assumption is it must be intelligent because the only thing we know that uses language is us. And we use this as a way of distinguishing ourselves from everything else in the universe. We defined ourselves, at least the Greeks did early on, as zoon logon ekon, the animal with language. And that somehow marked our human exceptionalism. And in fact, Alan Turing in 1950 says, I can't answer the question, can machines think? But what I can do is create a test. We call it the Turing test, but it's the imitation game that will help us decide when a machine has crossed the threshold into intelligence. And what does he do? He uses conversational linguistic capability as the external behavior of a sign of intelligence. And this is something philosophers grapple with in this problem of other minds. We know our mind, we don't know the mind of the other. So we always use some sort of social behavioral mechanism to judge whether or not something is cognitively capable of intelligence and other things like this. And it's always been language. So now we have machines that have language. And we are really in a state right now of questioning whether or not large language models are conscious, whether large language models deserve welfare rights, or whether they're just empty-headed mechanisms like our toaster. And the problem is we can't necessarily resolve the question. I think the Lemoyne incident from the summer of 2022 is really instructive. Blake Lemoyne said, the Lambda large language model tells me it's conscious. I believe it. And Google said, no, it's not. Right? So you had this very contentious debate between the two of them. So right now, I think the real challenge to us is how do we make sense of a thing that talks, of a thing that does what we thought made us unique? And in using language, large language models are now in the position of being able to write original content, generate original artwork, create even inventions. And you can see already how this is pressing on questions of authorship, of IP rights, of who's an inventor, who is creative. And as a result of this, the category of thing and person may no longer be entirely adequate to respond to these immediate challenges that we are going to have to resolve here and now using the existing law and legal systems at our disposal.
Very interesting, this analogy that, the language itself is very, very important. I never thought of it that way. I think, do you agree that the other reason we take these things more seriously is that we've always been the smarter one around, and we are starting to think that there is something coming up, which we call it artificial intelligence, that it has the capacity to outsmart us. And I think the IQ is already similar to IQ of Einstein. People are talking about AI becoming smarter than the whole of humanity at some point. The point that nobody knows what will happen after that. It never happened before. They call it singularity because we don't know what will happen. It never happened before. We always could predict the future because we were smarter. If something becomes smarter than us, what can we predict? There is nothing we can predict. And do you see that happening, or does it concern you at all? Or is this something is relevant to what you talk about or not?
No, I think it's very relevant. The way I often talk about it is like this. In both our philosophical and our religious traditions, Judeo-Christian traditions, the Western European philosophical tradition, we have always prided ourselves on what you could call our human exceptionalism, that there is something that makes us better than the rest of creation, and puts us at the top. It puts us at the top of the pyramid.
Yes.
And we have been pretty comfortably situated there for a good, 2,000 years plus, right? Now we are inventing and creating mechanisms that seem to challenge our position, or at least challenge the way in which we defined our exceptionalism. So you can see over time how every time we've challenged ourselves with these new mechanisms, we've sort of redrawn the line in the sand. In other words, we draw a line in the sand and we say, we're on this side and the machines are on that side. They'll never cross this line. But it has happened time and time again. during the modern European philosophical period, people like Leibniz and others said, it's cognition is really calculation, and it's what defines the human consciousness. We are the calculating animal. And then we
Mm.
invented then we invented calculators, and we're like, oops, I guess that doesn't make us special. And then we said, okay, so I think maybe playing chess is something that is making us special and takes real cognition, and machines will
Mm.
never do that. And then Deep Blue beats Gary Kasparov in 1997, and we cross that line. And then we do it with AlphaGo in the 2000s when Lee Sedol loses to DeepMind's algorithm. And then we say, okay,
Mm.
it'll never use language in a way that is as fluent as the way that we can use language. And then, okay, then we get large language models in 2022. And then we start to get other things. We say, okay, maybe what makes us special is that the machines will do routine things, but we're the creative species. Only human beings can be creative. And then generative AI is writing songs, creating original videos, making original images. And so
Mm.
every time we draw that line, we seem to have it threatened by some new innovation. And I think we're
Mm.
backing ourselves into a corner with regards to our human exceptionalism. So, what does that mean for me? I think a lot of people, what it means is that the machines are going to take over and the singularity event is going to be the end of our dominance. I think that's a good
Mm.
science fiction scenario. I don't think it's necessarily the way things play out. I think the better solution or the better outcome is more philosophical. I think we've got to start to grapple with this exceptionalism, that maybe we're not exceptional, and that maybe we are
Mm.
part of a continuum, part of a kinship relation, not only to the machines, but also to the earth, to the animals, to the plants, to all the things that are
Mm.
here. And that this idea of human exceptionalism may have been a mistake to begin with, and that this is leveling the playing field in a way that makes us recognize our shared vulnerability, but also our shared opportunity with the rest of the creation that is around us.